Hello and welcome to the Indiana Library Federation Intellectual Freedom Virtual Exchange. The title of this session is Intellectual Freedom 101, What Do I Need to Know? This is our first virtual exchange for this committee, and so we're hoping that this goes well and that we can continue to do more throughout the year. So my name is Kelsey McLean. I am a library services specialist at Goshen College, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I've been working at Goshen since last summer, and prior to that, I spent about 11 or 12 years working with youth and teen services. So since 2017, the Indiana Library Federation has prioritized a focus on intellectual freedom. And so in this session, we want to provide a quick overview of a range of issues under the header of intellectual freedom. This is not all inclusive, but designed to get you thinking and wanting to know more. So be thinking of questions as we go through this. The Intellectual Freedom Committee does have a page on the ILF website, and this link will take you to it. And one thing to just let you know is that these slides with all of the links and everything will be posted along with this video to the ILF website. So make sure when you have some time to kind of go through and peruse all of the links and look into information that you're interested in. So the Intellectual Freedom Committee is comprised of about 7 to 12 members, all from public, academic, or school libraries. And we try to stay informed about issues bubbling up around the state and the country. And then we meet every other month to kind of talk about these issues and come up with some ideas for tips and resources for members and library staff around the state. We do have two main objectives that we're always working on. The first one is to consider all aspects of intellectual freedom as they relate to Indiana libraries, their employees, and users. And the other big one is to provide tools and resources for members and library staff around the state. And there are a couple of ways that we have been working on that particular objective. One are these virtual exchanges. So this is our first one, and we're continuing to do these about every other month throughout the year. We also have been creating some short training videos on a variety of topics related to intellectual freedom. And again, those you can get to from the link at the top of this slide. So keep an eye, that's always growing. We're always adding more to that. And then we have a goal this year that we have an intellectual freedom session at every ILF conference throughout the year. So if you are thinking about a conference or already signed up for one, keep an eye out for one of the intellectual freedom sessions. And as always, we're always open to ideas. So if you have questions, concerns, things you want to bring up about a topic or really anything, please just reach out and let us know. That's kind of how I got involved in the committee. So I do know for sure that the committee and the ILF in general are very responsive to questions and concerns and ideas. So make sure that you keep in touch. We do have a couple goals for this session that I want to point out. Of course, we want an understanding of what intellectual freedom means and why it's important, but we also want to create a safe space to chat and ask questions. We know that many librarians may feel alone and unsure about certain aspects of intellectual freedom or how to face certain patrons in certain scenarios, so we want to create that support system for you. And then we hope to show you a range of issues and some places to start for information. So if you're thinking about creating or updating any policies, we want to make sure to give you the resources to get that process started. So a general overview of intellectual freedom has we have a couple of these links that you can go to on your own. I'm not going to go to any of them. A lot of them go to the American Library Association. So the general definition of intellectual freedom is the right of everyone to seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. This means free access for all. So basically, if you want to learn something, you should be able to access any tools and resources to make that happen, even if what you're looking at, what you believe, what you're asking about is an unpopular opinion. Many intellectual freedom materials are available from the ALA and the Freedom to Read Foundation, and I will frequently reference the ALA in this presentation. However, that's not always the first step for these issues, and what we understand is that what we're talking about are values to libraries as a whole and not to any specific organization. So above all, we want to just keep in mind that these are library values, not ALA values or Freedom to Read values specifically. So what is censorship? What does that look like? Censorship does relate to the First Amendment. So it is the suppression of ideas and information that a particular group might find offensive, objectionable, or dangerous. So to the extreme, you can think of Fahrenheit 451, burning books, arresting people owning books, but think more locally. So things like restricting access to materials. Some of the most frequent cases we have lately relate to materials with LGBTQ plus characters, graphic violence, or political content. And remember, censorship can happen from any standpoint, liberal or conservative. It's just someone or some group trying to suppress another group or person. Censors want to prejudge materials for everyone rather than allowing people to learn and educate themselves. And this happens a couple of ways. Whenever any type of material, so a book, film, online resource, work of art, any of those things are removed or kept from public access, that becomes censorship. This also happens when materials are restricted based on age or other characteristics. So such things as restricting films based on an R rating, so not allowing children to select those films, or having a back shelf at a school library. I grew up where the back shelf of the library, you could only check out those books if you had a signed consent form from a parent. That is also a form of censorship. Or having LGBTQ plus stickers on the spines of your books. That's a characteristic, not a genre. And so those three things are all examples of what censorship could look like more locally in the library. And the people usually trying to censor are individuals who believe censorship will improve society and protect children. But this, like I said, goes against the First Amendment, which I'll get into here in a second. However, there is an issue with minors, and it's sensitive and complicated, and we haven't quite navigated all of that, as federal and state laws may require certain practices, especially regarding filtering. So if you have questions about that topic in particular, make sure that you reach out. We don't have all of the answers for all of that, and it's definitely something we're going to address in this presentation as well. There are a couple of things that legally can be censored according to the First Amendment, and that's obscenity, child pornography, defamation, and quote unquote fighting words. So if you have any questions about what those terms mean or what they look like in the library, please, you can obviously go to the ALA, but if you research the First Amendment, you can get a little more information about that. Why is this important? Why are we talking about intellectual freedom? First of all, I just think that as libraries, it's important to communicate with one another, see what's going on, what issues are coming up in different libraries so we can support one another, making sure that the ILF is communicating with members to kind of spread the word about different issues going on and what resources are available to libraries around the state. But it does come down to a legal standpoint in the First Amendment, which is the right to hear all sides of every issue and make one's own judgments about those issues without government interference or limitations. So anyone should be able to speak, publish, read, or view whatever they wish. And people should respect others to do the same. Libraries also welcome all. So First Amendment or no, libraries are here as neutral spaces to welcome everybody, to give access to everyone. And the ILF's tenet is because libraries welcome all, and that's something that we continue to strive to uphold. So we want to make sure that no matter who you are, you feel comfortable and you feel like you have a space in the library. Censoring and filtering creates barriers not just physically, but also psychologically, barriers to services that the library provides, and language skills barriers to access. So keeping all of that in mind, we can really stymie our patrons from using the library when we start to censor things. So this is the really long, drawn out part of this presentation. These are some intellectual freedom policies and issues that often come up that we talk about, that's important to know about. And some of these you may already know and have some of these policies, and perhaps some of these you hadn't really thought were intellectual freedom related at all. So hopefully this will kind of get our brains working, thinking of some conversations that we could have later. So the first thing on here is collection development, and this talks about having diversity in your collection, making sure you have a policy letting patrons know what types of materials the library buys, why they buy it, who they buy it from, the library's values in determining what materials are purchased for the library. And so this particular link reaches out to the Arapahoe Library District just south of Denver, where I used to work. What I really like about their policy is that they identify that it is up to the parents to determine what their children can read and access, and it's distancing the library from families, because again, the libraries are neutral, welcoming all, and we aren't in charge of determining what is appropriate for a specific child or not. So I do like that they have that. And they also have a material challenge form. So I I linked to the Arapahoe Library District for that, and also the Bremen Public Library. So if a patron comes in wanting something removed from the library, this is a form that can be used. What I like about the Bremen Public Library's form is that it's been revamped. It's very lengthy. It really makes the person think about why they want that material removed from the library. And it also at the very end has a copy of the collection development policy to refer back to. And this was created and revamped after speaking with Napanee, the Napanee Public Library, as they also revamped their policy. So a lot of it we lovingly borrowed from them. So having those extra steps for people to really understand that there is a process to getting materials. So you can have a look at that if you're interested in what some policies look like. The next one is censorship, freedom to read. This goes back to the Freedom to Read site associated with the ALA. Again, just promoting inclusivity and diversity in the library, allowing everyone to get what they're interested in. Next on there is meeting spaces and programming. This link does go to the American Library Association and their policies on that and their information on that. But if you go back to the Arapahoe Library District, what I like about what they do is they disconnect the library from outside groups. So as libraries, we welcome all. Anybody can use our spaces. It doesn't matter if you're, where you land on the political spectrum or whatever. Anyone should be able to use that space as long as they follow the meeting space policy. And so Arapahoe Library has that policy in place, and they do say that the library does not endorse any outside groups using the space. And if that outside group tries to advertise any sort of endorsement or connection to the library, they lose the privilege of using that space, and that is in their policy. So that's one way that they can distance themselves. So still allowing for freedom of speech and fair use of all of that, but they also make sure that the library is not being dragged into something that it shouldn't be. The next one on there is disability services, and this links to one of those micro training videos that I created that talks about how we can best serve patrons with disabilities in our libraries, from physical spaces to programming to outreach to online access. It has a little bit of everything in there, and this is very near and dear to my heart. That's what I still continue to do in my current position. So if you have any questions about that, I feel like this is one subject that I have a little more experience with. Digital access is on there, and that just means online access. A lot of people don't have internet or computers at home, and they rely on that from the library. So making sure that everyone has equal access to the physical machine, but also getting into filtering, which I'll talk about here in just a second. So making that access available to adults, children, everyone who needs to use that, both in the library and maybe accessing remotely. So ebooks or e-audio books fall under that category. Equal access is the very broad term. Again, everyone just getting access where they need it, when they need it, making sure that we're not censoring or stopping anybody from accessing whatever they need. So that's kind of a general term for everything the library stands for. Next on there is labeling, and this is, the first link goes to another micro training video that I created talking more about like Dewey Decimal System labeling and genre labeling, but it also touches a little bit on characteristic labeling, so LGBTQ stickers. It doesn't really get into accelerated reader leveling, but that's definitely a hot topic these days. Do we put AR stickers and information on the outside of a book? Do we organize our library collection by AR level? And what does that mean to the privacy of a student looking for a particular book? So definitely check that out. And the ALA links also to their labeling that goes into more depth with the AR as well. So that's definitely is a topic that has come up quite frequently lately. So if you have questions, make sure that you're letting us know what those questions are. The next thing on there is hate speech and hate crimes, and this also links to the ALA. And fortunately for myself, I have not had to witness this firsthand in any of my libraries that I've worked at, but I know it happens. I know people have experienced this. So if you have questions about what this looks like, what you can do, what are legal obligations, please make sure that you check out this resource and reach out to us so we can continue getting those resources to you to make sure that you feel safe and feel like you're advocating for all of your patrons. The last three I kind of think flow together. So filtering, privacy, and schools and minors. Filtering comes down to mostly online access. What are we filtering for minors, both at the school and at the public library? And there's some research through the ALA, which I've linked to, that talks about the disadvantages of filtering and how it's not really something the ALA stands for, and how that might deter research for students. The privacy comes into play as far as, looking at what people are looking up on the web, what information we give to the government. If a police officer stops by at the library, what information can we give them about a specific patron, patron records, and also what information can we give parents about their children's library records. And so that gets into, it is a little murky because they are the parents, they should have this information. However, everybody has that right to their own privacy, including minors. So where do we draw the line of what we share with parents and what is private to the minor? So that issue kind of comes into play there. And then schools and minors, that gets, I think, even murkier, because at the school you have administration also interested in certain data. And so what information are they allowed to glean from library records or online records, that sort of thing. So those three are definitely things that we've been talking about a lot. And hopefully you have questions, you have some ideas that you can share with us and with one another, so we can continue to support each other in this endeavor. So this is a very long list. It's very comprehensive, and we recognize that each library situation is a little different. Schools, public and academic libraries operate under different regulations, and we provide services that relate and reflect the purpose of the community and the collection there. So we really just want to say that these things are there. Let's talk about them. What can we do to continue to support you? So please let us know how we can do that. So if you're ready to look at some of these issues, create or revamp policies, we want to give you the tools to kind of get that started. So once again, I'll direct you to the ALA for guidelines and help creating these policies. They have certain things that you can include in policies. But for me, that's not always like the first place that I go to. I really like to look at what other libraries are doing, what has worked well, what have they tried, what hasn't worked, to just kind of get a feel, especially libraries that are from a similar community to mine, whether that's in the state of Indiana or even branching out further across the US. So let's just keep talking. Let's share our ideas. Let's share what's working, and continue to make those policies as airtight, and advocate for our patrons the best we can. So again, I have here the intellectual freedom resources that link out, but I also wanted to add on this slide reporting any material challenges. So if you have someone in your library wanting to challenge any material and have it removed, you can report this to the ALA Office of Intellectual Freedom, whether it's a formal challenge or not. And the ALA keeps track of all of that information. And you can do this anonymously. And it does not have to be the director of a library. It can be any staff member. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. And so when the ALA kind of disseminates all of this information, the Indiana Library Federation also gets this information and specific to the state. So we can continue to support members and to kind of keep an eye on which issues, which topics, which things are coming up that we need to keep an eye out for, so we can continue to advocate for libraries in Indiana. So where do we start? I've now talked at you for a very long time, and so I want to know what you're doing, what you're thinking, what challenges there are. So take a minute, think about your library, look around your library, and ask yourself to identify 2 ways your library is promoting intellectual freedom. Probably you've been doing it and you didn't even realize that was a topic of intellectual freedom. And so, kudos to you for keeping intellectual freedom strong in your library. Perhaps you have a diverse collection, or you're careful to protect patron privacy. Jot those things down, keep them in mind. It could be big or small, and make sure you're sharing those with others. If it's something that another library can implement, we want to make sure that we're talking about that. But of course, it wouldn't be a real challenge if we didn't also ask you to identify 2 areas where you might improve in regards to intellectual freedom. So think about 2 things that your library could potentially do from ideas that you've heard in this presentation. We most frequently hear that our members want to update their collection development policy or get their staff talking as a group to share the same understanding about the library's values, policies, and practices. So those are two that we hear about. That could be the same for you. It could be other things. Again, it could be big or small things, but it's just something that we want you to be thinking about and reaching out, like I said, to other libraries to see what's going on in other places to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're all forming some unity to continue to advocate for patrons. And lastly, if you do have those questions, we'll talk about it in the virtual exchange, but if you wanna reach out specifically to ask us any questions or request support or resources, the email is up there that you can do that. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen and to watch, and we hope that you have a little bit more of an understanding of intellectual freedom, and we hope that you have gotten some ideas of things that we can start to do in our libraries. So thanks for watching and have a great day.